Darian Alexis, and welcome to a 20-something survival guide, the place where you and me learn to survive and thrive in our 20s and beyond. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. So I know recently on your podcast, you had an episode about friendship breakups where you talked about this. So I just wanted to plug your podcast, let everyone know I'm putting it in the show notes. It has been one of my favorite podcasts lately. Actually, it has been my number one favorite podcast lately. I just think that you give such good advice and are so relatable. So I'm so grateful that you could come on the pod today. Thank you.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here. This is like my first guest one, and I was telling my boyfriend and my parents, I'm like, I'm so excited. Like, it's not going to feel like an interview. It's like, you know, two girlies just chatting, which is what I always want.
I know. And that's something I'm really, really trying to get better at for this podcast. It's really nerve-wracking, honestly, like recording a podcast in general, but it's twice as more nerve-wracking when you have another person there. Because when it's just me, it's like, oh, I'm just chatting, I'm talking. But like with you, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to mess up. I don't want to sound stupid. I want to keep the listeners engaged. So I'm really trying to make sure that the episodes are more engaging, flowing. And it's just like, you know, we're on FaceTime together and our listeners are here with us.
Exactly. Like they're just a fly on the wall listening to the chit chats.
No, absolutely. But bringing it back to our points, the next one is that you may be experiencing feelings of social isolation. And oh my gosh, this is me. But I would say that this, and maybe this could be for you too, I feel this deep social isolation after moving. Like I didn't feel that way before, but I moved to a new place, and I think a lot of 20-somethings after college are moving to a new state, new city, where they're surrounded by people they don't know. And so there's just that instant social isolation. Have you experienced that in New Jersey?
Yes. So I would say it really started for me. So when I was younger, I'd be like, oh, I'm anxious. Like I'm scared to dance or scared to, you know, do a presentation. But up until COVID, I had no idea what anxiety was. I now, like, the doomsday feeling, it's so crazy. I don't know if it's because of COVID or because of moving, and I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not constantly, like, stimulated, and I was working. It sucks. I was working remote, so I don't know if it's all of those things or just in being this quarter life crisis, but my social battery gets so drained. I have to, like, give myself a pep talk before going out to lunch with someone because I'm, like, so afraid of this like perception and like wanting to just hide into this shell of my body.
1,000%. I could not relate more. I thought I had a little anxiety. Like I'm saying anxiety because now that I do have anxiety, I know what I was experiencing before was not anxiety. But once the pandemic hit, I did hit like an all-time low. I hit an all-time low. We did not get to live out our senior year. And honestly, I was super involved in college. So I was so excited for my senior year, like my last hurrah. And then just like, no, you're done. You're done. And then you're thrown out into this world where I was working remote too, because basically everyone was working remote at the time. So we started our careers working remote, which is super isolating to begin with, because how are you supposed to make friends when you're in a remote setting at work and you're no longer in college? You no longer have the clubs and sororities and like things that are basically just built-in friends.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's been rough. And even if you're about to graduate now, or you're just starting your 20s journey, or even if you're a 30 or 40-year-old listening, like I'm not sure that those feelings necessarily go away. But one tip I would say is that has helped me with the social isolation feeling is really calling my family.
Same.
I was definitely not as close with my family basically all the way through college. Like some families are so tight knit and I love my family, but we were not that way. However, after moving to Connecticut, I experienced the most alone feeling I'd ever felt. And not that it's my friends' fault, but like a lot of my friends didn't necessarily like check in once I moved. Everyone's just dealing with their own thing. Everyone has their own lives and their own problems. And I get that. But I didn't want to be the ones reaching out. So I started talking to my mom every day. And now I talk to my mom every single day, which is great. But she has really helped me with the social isolation that I was feeling when I first moved out here.
I definitely relate to that. Yeah, talk to my parents a lot. Even like my brother, who we didn't always talk all the time, like
Yeah.
making sure I'm always talking to him. And I have like one or two best friends that like they've known me since childhood. So even just talking to them,
Mm-hmm.
like say you're not as close with your family members, and I've had plenty of like falling out to the family that still trying to rebuild, but also like they're adults too, so they can reach out too. But if you have a few close friends that know like the true you, like I know we grow so much and change as we, become like teenagers, adults. So if you can talk to someone that has kind of watched you go through all of this, I feel like it kind of reminds me of like home isn't necessarily a place, but home is your people. And you can also be your
Yes.
home if you reach out
Yes.
to those people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. And I think that something else that has kind of helped me with the social isolation too is just kind of like journaling
Yeah.
and finding peace in that isolation, because it's really all perception. Some people love to be alone. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, there's a difference between like being alone and being lonely, I
Yes.
guess. So just kind of trying to change the mindset, change the perception, and know that if you do want a community, that there's one out there that you can go and find.
I totally agree. And the same thing with like isolation. Instead of looking at it as like, wow, I'm so alone, I try to think of times and it's like, oh, I get to learn me, or just appreciate the peace and the bliss for the days that say I do have a lot and say I'm anxious to go do all that. If I can really like tap in and be like, wow, I have a free night, like instead of, oh, I'm not going out with my friends, oh, I get to like have a bubble bath, watch a movie, make a mocktail, whatever.
That was great advice. I love it.
Thank you.
Our next point is you feel like you need to find a purpose. And this is the one that I know this is my quarter life crisis, that I need to find
Yeah.
a purpose. Last night when I was sitting on the couch crying to my boyfriend, like crocodile tears, I'm like, what is my purpose? What am I doing? I have no idea what I'm doing. My life has no purpose, because I always thought my purpose was to help people. And that's like one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because you have your purpose and then you have your kind of like your how. And so
Right.
my purpose, I always felt, was to help people. And how did I do that? I tried to do it through my content creation. However, the content creation world is so oversaturated. There's
Yeah.
so many people doing so many things, and I don't want that to deter anyone from going out and creating content, because you are you and there's no one like you. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say there's so much imposter syndrome that comes because of it.
And it's such a slow build.
Such a slow build. Like, I'm coming up on 1 year of this podcast, and I love all my followers. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being tuned in. But
Period.
wish that it was easier to like grow my garden.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I feel
it's
that.
really hard to find your people and to market yourself, especially when you don't have like a team behind you doing that. So do you
Exactly.
experience these same feelings with your podcast, or just like what do you think that your purpose is?
So it's funny you say that, because so without like getting too deep, like little trigger warning, when I was like 21, 22, I had like a raging eating disorder, like was so horribly underweight. And because I was like, well, damn, I lost my senior year. I can't see my friends. So, but I can control like my body. I can control what I'm doing, what I'm eating, how I look. And, it became like such a sickness, one could say. And I started to heal that over the last 2 years. And I did the 75 hard. I want to say August, because as I healed myself, which came with, being a healthy weight, I struggled so hard with that. Like seeing me look healthy, I was like disturbed, you know what I mean? And as I am getting into my mid 20s, your hips are expanding, you're becoming a woman, you're not a little girl anymore. And that really fucked with my head. So I, started doing the 75
Mm-hmm.
hard in a healthy way, not to like restrict myself or cut anything out. And it was more to like wake up every day with a purpose. And so like midway through that, I said to my boyfriend, like 2 months into my podcast, I'm like, I think my purpose, I'm thinking about it way too much. I think my purpose is to just make people smile and like
Yes.
make
I
light of
love that.
situations, not trying to like, oh, fix someone or preach
Mm-hmm.
about this, preach about that. Just like Making someone smile, even if it's someone in the supermarket or at CVS or holding a door or just something so simple, because my life was so dark for so long because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I needed a beacon of hope, so I had to become that for myself, and that's just what I want to be for other people. Long story short, I just want to make people smile.
I think that that is absolutely amazing. And I really appreciate you for being so vulnerable because I know that that's something that's really hard. So thank you for opening up.
Of
But I
course.
think what my boyfriend was telling me last night, he was trying to be like, Darian, why do you need a purpose? Like, our purpose could be as small as to make someone smile, or it can be
Exactly.
like just to find a little piece of joy in every day. I think some of
Mm-hmm.
us think way too into, our purpose or like who we are, what we're supposed to be. And at the end of the day, I think all of our purpose just comes down to is trying to make the most out of every day and every experience for both ourselves and the people around us. So,
Exactly. I love
major
that.
snaps to that.
Yes.
Our next one is you feel more insecure.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever grow out of that.
Me either. I'm like, I don't think that's a quarter life crisis thing. I think that's just like a daily life thing.
That's just like a given. And maybe that's just like the comparison of like feeling behind, but I don't think I'll ever outgrow that, no matter what you think.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't even know if I can give tips on how to not be insecure because
Mhm.
I'm sure people think that we're both of us are just like super confident. No, that is just the Sagittarius energy coming out of us.
Yes,
But
yes.
that does not mean we're not insecure because I honestly think that like I might be one of the most insecure people on this world, even though I may not come off that way.
I agree. And when I knew I was in my most was when I was such a hater because like I might seem like a nice person now, but high school me was such a bitch and it's because she was so insecure. So like I would take out my insecurities on other people. And I think that's kind of, obviously maturing. So I think maybe
Mm-hmm.
the insecurity aspect switches from like, instead of hating on someone because say, I don't know, say they have clearer skin than you or they're married or whatever, instead of like leaving hate comments, you kind of just become more harsh on yourself. And I think that's just part of being a woman, but also part of being like a human.
Do I have anything else to add to this? No. You
No,
covered it.
that was an easy bullet point for us.
Easy bullet point. Good because we've been chatting on some of the other ones.
No.
Okay, point 7. Difficulty making decisions, even if it's a good one.
Good old decision paralysis. I know her well.
Do you think, like, maybe with your job, like quitting your job, do you think you got some of that decision paralysis?
Yeah, because I'm like, oh, well, I'm losing like my security blanket, but it's also like, okay, well, you've also done things like have a savings account, you still have a degree, you have a boyfriend that's really supportive, and like I can afford what I'm doing right now. I still have other
Yeah.
avenues to like explore, but I was so burnt out in what I was doing that I started feeling burnt out on my podcast and just like content creation and just like kind of letting dreams just like go further and further in the rearview mirror, which was so devastating.
No, I can definitely relate to that. I don't feel like I necessarily ever face difficulty making a decision. I am a little indecisive,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, I've just been feeling like kind of lost, I
Yeah,
guess, like with what I want to do. But that was kind of more bullet point number 1. So we don't need to yeehaw our way back there.
we got that one.
We got that one covered. And lastly, comparing yourself to others. This is definitely how I wanted to talk about how my quarter life crisis, occurs
Yeah,
because comparison is so the thief of joy. I know that is
yeah,
definitely a quote that you've said on your podcast. That's one I hear on basically every podcast I listen to. Like, that
yes,
is a quote that is just facts. Hashtag
yeah.
truth. I compare myself to everyone, and it is so, so hard not to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really trying to not do that. But even my friends, a lot of my friends are in marketing as well. I'm in marketing, I'm in social media. So, like,
Right.
I'll even compare myself to my friends and, like, no, why am I doing that? They're my friends. Like, I support them. I love what they're doing. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my God, they're so much better than me. Why do I even try? But, like, why am I thinking like that? Like, I shouldn't be
No,
thinking like that.
I totally feel that. And like, yeah, I just feel like your mid-20s are, you're in such a perfect place to compare yourself. There's so much media being thrown at you. And like, even my mom, she hates going on Facebook, just seeing like, oh, what this person's doing, what they're doing with their husband, or the big, beautiful house they're renovating. And it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like that will never change, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just mainly because of social media. Because if it
Yeah.
wasn't for social media, I don't think I myself as much or as frequently. Because instead of sitting here and being grateful for like the platform that I do have and the job that I
Mm-hmm.
do have and the skills that I do have and the blessings that I have, I wish I was better. I wish I was her. Why didn't I think of that idea? Why didn't I do this? And like, it is just such a toxic mindset to be in. And so one way that I've tried to like lessen the comparison is just simply by going on social media less.
I agree. And I always have to remind myself that, like, one, social media is a highlight reel, which, like, everyone knows that, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so hard to, like, pound that into your brain. And then number two is, like, you overlook all of the things that are so good about you because you've been living it. Like, some of my
Yeah.
friends are doing great in other areas, but don't have a college degree. And not that, like, having a college degree is better, but it's like, they might think, wow, like, Natalie has a college degree. And it's like, I don't even think about that for 2 seconds. I don't even think
Yeah.
about the good things that I have.
Is there any tips or strategies that you think the listeners can do or utilize to try to stop comparing?
I would definitely agree with you. Like, just going on social media less and
Mm-hmm.
tapping into things that, like, make you happy. Like, something I've really been trying to do over the last 9 months or so is getting a hobby and like just trying different things, even if it's something so simple as like painting or crocheting. Because if you're
Yeah.
focusing on how you are, being productive, you have way less time to be like, oh, Jennifer has a rockin' bod and a huge rock on her finger, like.
No, seriously. I think it's really funny because just the theme of almost every single one of my episodes, it always comes back to hobbies. And I
Yes, me
think that
too.
what I'm learning is that hobbies are the key to surviving and thriving in your 20s. And
Yes.
like when I say hobbies, there's like different hobbies you can have because what I've been struggling with has been all my hobbies are digital. They're all
Same.
online. And I feel like that does take away from my best mental health and best mindset. So I really, really want to push myself this year or this summer to get a hobby that is not digital at all. So like whether it's
Yeah.
crocheting or painting, puzzling, like these are all things I love that I just don't do because I spend
Yeah.
my time chronically scrolling or recording my podcast or editing my podcast or just everything that's digital, everything that's online. So I really 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 think that listeners should try to get a hobby that is not digital.
Yeah, and I always say like hobbies are hot, and especially at this point in our life, it's
Yes.
like you're stuck in between the grind mentality and do the next thing and push 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 versus like doing a soft girl dainty activity. It's like
Yeah.
I feel like there's always well, what are you going to do? Well, this person's grinding and going viral and I'm over here painting, but it's like you are serving yourself, you're healing your inner child. So I just think that I love social media, but it is very toxic if you lack boundaries, which I do.
Yeah, me too. And I think it just kind of comes back onto like, what is our purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Like, our purpose is to make ourselves happy. That doesn't mean we need to go viral. That doesn't mean we need 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 listeners on our podcast. It just
Right.
means like, just by helping one person, you're making a difference. And that should
Exactly.
really be what you're focusing your time and energy on, opposed to that comparison.
Right. Your purpose might be getting your daily coffee.
Yes, and that is a good purpose. I actually knew I forgot something before this episode. It was the fact that I wanted to make an iced coffee. I like
Oh
have all this stuff sitting out on the counter. Oh my god, I think I left the cream out, but it's fine.
no.
It's totally fine. So that wraps up like the 8 points. So I wanted to turn it over to you. Is there anything we didn't get to touch on that you feel like the listeners need to know of how your quarter
um,
life crisis is manifesting?
I think honestly, the really big thing that I know, like I've been know that I'm going through this little crisis is when I think of things that used to make me so happy, and I'm like, oh, why I haven't even touched that in like a year or two. I haven't even
Yes.
done that. It's like I neglect things because I think I outgrew it, but it's like, no, honey, you were just depressed. Like,
Yes. Oh my God. That is so relatable.
mhm.
So relatable. Like, what are some of the things and how are you going to bring them back to your life? Because you're going to.
Exactly. So, like, even just so I go to a lot of festivals, and one thing that I would always do is there's like bracelets that you make, they're called candy, and you just like put cute fun beads on them. And I used to love doing that on like a nice, beautiful morning, or even just reading a fun non self help book, which, like, I love a self help book, but I think it makes my brain spin too fast. And I'm like, oh, I could do this. But it's like, sometimes I just want to
Hmm.
exist. Like reading a book on my balcony when it's nice and sunny out, or even just doing yoga. I haven't done yoga in like 8 months. And when I was doing yoga, I felt so at peace with myself. Like, so simple, but it works.
I hope you can get back into them because I agree.
Thank you.
There's some things that I don't do anymore that I feel like used to bring me joy. It's because I'm just not really doing them.
Right, exactly.
I experience a lot of stress over just adulting in general because I had no idea what to expect. I cry to my mom all the time simply about paying bills, cooking, and cleaning.
Hmm.
I did not know how much time and energy it would take to simply keep a house clean. And I
Yeah.
feel so guilty. I did not help my mom growing up because now that I have my own space, I feel like so anxious when it's not clean. And I feel like you definitely can tell my mental headspace based on how clean my apartment is.
Same.
Cool. Well, let's get into our story submission. So I had the listeners submit their quarter life crisis stories. So this first story says, I think about completely changing my job and moving states because I can't truly tell if I'm happy, but I also don't know if I really want to do either of those things and it's actually just a phase.
Ooh. One thing my grandpa always told me is the only things that are for certain that you can't change are death and taxes. So I say take the risk. Maybe try moving first. If you can move with your job, try moving first.
Yeah, I agree with that. My advice for this person, since it was anonymous, is I agree. Take the risk because you'll always wonder what if. I
Yes.
always wanted to move to Connecticut. I had to quit my job to come here and I had to move states. And I'm not going to lie, like I was happier back in Indiana in my old job in the old state. And I don't regret moving here because I learned that, but I would have always wondered what if. And you can
Hmm.
always go back, but I rather live knowing that I tried than just having this kind of looming over my head. Should I do it?
Exactly. I totally agree. Take the risk. We're here for you.
Our next story. Okay. I turned 25 coming out of COVID. After feeling so much isolation for the past year, I needed to feel alive again. So, my last night as 24, I scheduled a time to jump out of an airplane the very next day. The exhilaration and adrenaline from that event kickstarted a whole new journey of trying new things and allowing myself to take risks. Since then, I've stopped waiting for the right time to do things and I focused on just saying yes. Okay,
Wow.
love. Yeah, I need to take your advice, whoever this is. You should be
No,
on this episode with us.
yes, you are our new best friend because I've always wanted to go skydiving. Where I went to school was like the skydiving capital of, I don't know if it's the world, just United States,
That's
whatever.
wild.
And I need to go. So I think you are a badass and should be on here.
No, I agree. Like, that is really good advice. You're invited on the next podcast episode. If this was you, send us a DM and we'll chat with you next.
Yes.
Submission 3. I wanted to be a teacher my entire life. I've been teaching for 4 years and I hate it. I'm 25 and changing my career to be a pricing analyst. It is terrifying walking away from something I've always wanted to do for so long and put so much effort into. Okay. So I know exactly who submitted this one just because it was very specific in detail. And what I would say, bestie, is I'm proud of you for walking away from something that wasn't serving you. I think that in life in general, we all have a plan of what we want to do and we think we know what we want to do. But as we're moving through our 20s, new things start coming to fruition and we start to learn what what is serving us and what isn't serving us. So I'm proud of you for starting a new career, even though you thought you wanted to be a teacher, you just know it wasn't for you. And I think that's okay.
I totally agree. And I don't think I know one person in my life who's like an established adult that has not changed their career path. Like even with fully being in a job for X amount of years, I don't think I know one person that has stayed in it their whole life. And if they have, props to them. But I think you are probably the majority of doing something to, better serve yourself.
For sure. I couldn't agree more. I think that you are exactly where you need to be. And if you become a pricing analyst and you realize that's not for you either, you can go back to teaching, or you can even do another 180, 360 and find something that better suits you. Life is never too short, or it's never too late is what I'm trying to say. It's never too late to start anew, to start over. So whether you're 40, 50, 60, it doesn't matter. Like, you still have time to start over as well.
Exactly. You are always on time. You're never late.
Absolutely. So our next submission said, I realized I had no good and true friends and I panicked. So I downloaded Bumble BFF. Great. I'm sorry for one that you feel like you have no good and true friends, but I think I know so many people that feel the same way. And I think Bumble BFF is a great tool to utilize to make new friends. I've made friends on Bumble BFF. I know I've promoted Bumble BFF on this podcast. So I definitely think you're not alone.
Definitely not. I've downloaded it too. And there's like, you just got to find like the right people, which, even if when you're a little kid and you walk into school, you're not going to stick with every single person you like, but I definitely think you're taking the right steps.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're taking the right steps. And so I'm proud of you for acknowledging that like your friends were not the ish and you're going out and trying to make some. Like, you're doing everything you can possibly be doing. So you're doing great, sweetie.
Yes.
Lastly, a listener said, oh, this is perfect because I always call my current situation my quarter life crisis. Retweet.
Yep.
I hated my job, so I applied to be a flight attendant. I didn't know where I was going to be based until a week before I had to move. It turned out to be Connecticut. Ooh, tea. A state I've never been to. So I packed up my life and started a new one here. Best decision I've ever made, but it was chaotic when people would ask me where I was moving and I had to say, I don't know. I also had an EF Ultimate Break trip booked, so I had to move it up so I could leave before I started for my new job, which meant I was between jobs, living it up in Peru just 2 weeks before the move. Honestly, I 10 out of 10 recommend.
I love that for you. I think everyone should, the fact that you were experiencing all these new things at once, I think that is giving you the most life experiences that you could truly ask for in like such a short amount of period of time.
No, I agree. I feel like I think it's funny that you started with saying I call everything in my life a quarter life crisis, because same, but this story like had such a beautiful ending, which just means that there is a rainbow at the end of the storm. So I love this for you. I'm glad you love Connecticut. I'm glad you lived it up in Peru, and 10 out of 10 recommend to anyone. So she's saying maybe for Miss or Mr. pricing analyst, if it doesn't work out for you, become a flight attendant. Switch things up.
Yes.
So Natalie, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. This was so exciting and so fun, and we'll definitely have to get you onto my podcast to do a continuation. I would love that. I hope everyone enjoyed.
I would absolutely love that. I did want to ask you one question before we get going. What is your number one piece of advice for 20-something? So it can be something you learned, a little piece of wisdom, whatever you want to leave the listeners with today.
I'm so glad you didn't ask me for a fun fact, because, in interviews when people are like, hey, what's a fun fact about you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. One piece of advice that I would say is to not take yourself so seriously. Like, we are on a floating rock in space, and sometimes if I think about that too hard, I can spiral, because I'm like, oh, nothing matters. But like, if I think too hard about that, like, nothing truly matters, sometimes it gives me like this big gust of like confidence, and I'm like, oh, nothing matters, post, nothing matters, like, I'm gonna wear the outfit And I think that serves you so much more if you kind of tap into like your childlike spirit and just be silly, be goofy, be you, because no one really knows what tomorrow brings. And I would hate for you to not do something because of someone's perception of you, because you're going to perceive someone, they're going to perceive you. You can't really control it. So I think just stop taking life and yourself so seriously and just wait for, life to reveal all of the beautiful things to you.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
And as I said, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
To all the listeners, please, please, please. Actually, this is not a please. This is a command. Listen to It's Nap Time.
Please.
I will link all Natalie's social in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share your quarter life crisis story with us in the DMs at Darian Diaries on both Instagram and TikTok. If you haven't already, please consider rating the podcast. Anything you can do to just subscribe, rate, help boost
5
the pod.
stars.
Yeah, 5 stars. It's really going to help me continue to grow the podcast and this community. I'm here for you always. As always, I'm Darian Alexis, and don't forget to survive and thrive.